the 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the race for the 12th Congressional District.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Brad Means, evening anchor with WJBF News Channel 6 in Augusta, Georgia. You are watching the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. Now, this is the debate among candidates for Congressional District 12. District 12 covers portions of eastern and southeastern Georgia, including Augusta, Dublin, Douglas, and Statesboro. Time now to meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Rick Allen, a Republican who has represented Georgia's 12th district since 2014. Also joining us, Francis Johnson, a Democrat, practices criminal and civil law in Georgia's state and federal courts. Glad both of you all are here. Now let's meet our panelists lending us their time today. Raul Bali, a news anchor for Oconee Radio Group with stations in Eatonton, Greensboro, Madison, and Milledgeville. And Emily Jones, the host for Morning Edition on Georgia Public Broadcasting and reports on all things coastal Georgia for GPB's Savannah Bureau. So let's get started. For rules on today's debate, you can go to the Atlanta Press Club website. That's atlantapressclub.org. You'll find everything you need right there. To start the debate, each candidate is going to be asked one question. Raul Bali, you get the first question to Francis Johnson.
Thank you, Brad. Pastor Johnson, an issue you've raised in this campaign is opposing privatization of the United States Postal Service. Last year, the USPS lost $2.7 billion and has lost $65 billion over the past 10 years. How would you propose to solve the financial issues at the Postal Service? And I'm looking for specifics. Would be dropping Saturday service, cutting back on first-class mail, and maybe focusing on package delivery, which is significantly increased in, the era of Amazon. What would you do to solve the issues at the Postal Service?
Thank you, Raul, and thank you to the other moderators for this debate, an opportunity to talk about the critical issues. And there's not a single greater issue than privatization of our government, the taking over of our government by private business for their profit and not for the public good. Postal Service is a great example of that. I do think that where we can drive efficiencies, where we can reduce the burden to taxpayers, we should look into efforts to encourage and work with the private sector. But remember that the Postal Service uses no revenues from taxpayers. Not a single penny of the United States Postal Service budget comes from taxpayers. And secondly, it's been doing its job since it was passed in the Constitution of the United States. Matter of fact, it's done so well that folks sing songs about it. The mail must go through. No matter if it rains, sleets, or snows, the mail must go through. What you have is mandates from a Congress determined to get their hands on the Postal Service.
Well done.
The United States Postal Service is not for sale.
Mr. Johnson, great job. We appreciate that answer. Yes, sir. And now, Emily, your turn to ask a question of Rick Allen.
Congressman Allen, you have touted efforts to roll back federal regulation and also economic growth that you've spurred in your district. But District 12 is also home to a lot of really important natural resources for the state of Georgia, the Savannah River, a lot of inland creeks. So how do you plan to ensure that some of those are protected while you're spurring economic growth?
Well, we have a great history in the 12th district of obviously hunting, fishing, wildlife, and so on. In fact, our farmers do a great job. They have their fields and then they have their cover for the wildlife and that sort of thing. We have a number of hunting preserves. As far as our industries are concerned, obviously they're regulated by both EPD and EPA. We have, the great Savannah River there that we enjoy tremendous recreation on, and we want to continue to do that. I believe that we should maintain the environment. I think it is something that God gave us that we should preserve.
Mr. Allen, thanks a lot for that. And folks, that concludes the first portion of our debate. The candidates now get to ask a question to their opponent. Each question will be asked. The candidate will have 30 seconds to pose it, 60 seconds for the response, and then another 30 seconds after that for a rebuttal. And by random selection, Rick Allen, you get to ask the first question.
Yes, Mr. Johnson, we passed historic tax reform in the United States Congress and also through the Congressional Review Act rollback regulations. What we've seen is now unprecedented economic growth. In fact, we just became the world's leader in economic growth. My question to you is, would you have voted for this historic tax reform and the Congressional Review Act?
The answer to that question is no. That was a tax fraud perpetrated on the American people. Now, it did include some important reductions, but those reductions should have been balanced to businesses and to the middle class. We bailed out Wall Street 10 years ago, and we turned right around and gave those who benefited from that bailout another $1.5 trillion tax cut. And that came at the cost of our bridges, our roads, our schools, our veterans, and all of those who depend on services in this country. Now, make no mistake about it, no one wants to pay more taxes than they should pay, but we all have to pay our fair share. I'm just a country boy from Sylvania, Georgia. My grandfather raised me to pay my fair share, and it's irresponsible, the debt that this so-called legislation that you've proposed and passed and signed on to will push to our children and their children. They will have very difficult questions to ask about what you did in the last Congress.
Mr. Allen, 30 seconds for you if you'd like to respond to Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Please note that we had the highest corporate tax rate in the entire world. We have brought back 400,000 manufacturing jobs to this country. Probably will be 600,000 jobs by the time we get to the next Congress. Let me tell you something. The only way we're going to balance the budget in this country is to get people back to work. We got 20 million work-capable people right now who are stuck in welfare, who need jobs. And what we did, we signed career technical education to get folks trained up and back to work, and that's the only way we're going to balance the budget.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen. Francis Johnson, now your turn to ask a question of Rick Allen.
Mr. Allen, 4 years ago, you stood on this same stage and you looked at your then opponent, John Barrow, and you asked him, after 8 years of being in Congress, not passing a single piece of legislation, not having addressed the issues of Medicaid and Medicare or come up with a solution for our health care crisis, why the people, the good people of our district, should send him back to Congress. What is your answer as to why someone should give you your job back when you haven't done it in the first place?
Well, that's easy. We've made tremendous progress in the 12th District of Georgia. Like I said, through our historic tax reform and rollback of regulations. In fact, Georgia has one of the hottest economies in the entire country. Georgia has grown almost 800,000 jobs, my friend.
You should tell that to the people of Millen, Statesboro, Swainsboro.
Sir, I was in Millen yesterday, and I'm telling you, every small business down there is extremely pleased with how well things are going. We are employing people in the 12th District of Georgia. We added almost 100,000 jobs in Georgia last year. I am very proud of my record. I have passed legislation. I passed legislation to make sure that people like Lois Lerner with the IRS do not interfere and try to add taxes to conservative organizations, which I think the FBI director should have resigned on. That is just not the way our government should run.
Mr. Johnson, your chance to have a 30-second rebuttal to Mr. Allen.
Mr. Allen's record is replete with failures. He's gone to the Congress and engaged in very extreme partisan rhetoric, including saying to same gender-loving people that they were worthy of death, even used the Bible to back up his hateful rhetoric. He's far too extreme for the good people of Southeast Georgia, and then to look in the camera and to tell the hardworking seniors who've paid in to Social Security, who are expecting the promise to be kept for Medicare, that you will protect it, when you know that your Republican caucus is set to cut $2 trillion from those programs. Mr. Allen, we can do better.
Mr. Johnson, thanks. Real quick, 10 seconds, Mr. Allen. Have you ever said that anybody is deserving of death?
No, it's amazing to me how Bible illiterate my friend is. that particular scripture does not talk about life or death as it is concerned in
so
this
you can
world.
see that you did speak on the floor to your colleagues, and they walked out on you. You were even too extreme for the GOP.
Let me tell you something, my friend. That deals with eternal life and eternal death that we make a choice on every day. You make a choice on it, I make a choice.
Well, maybe in the Congress you should focus on the life that
Well, let me tell you, I was asked to give
Rick
pledge in the prayer at a private conference meeting, and I read scripture. When in America can you not read scripture and pray for your conference,
Rick Allen,
my friend? I'm telling you, we're in deep trouble.
Well, I'll tell you this much right now. We could use the balance of our time to talk about this issue, I assure you, but we're going to defer to our panelists now for the next portion of our program. The second round is behind us, and if you're just joining us, by the way, this is the debate between candidates for Georgia's 12th Congressional District, a debate that gets more heated by the moment. Back to the panel now to ask questions to the candidate of his or her choice until we run out of time. And as moderator, I may also ask questions. I'll determine also when a rebuttal is appropriate if that need arises. Emily Jones, you get the first question to the candidate of your choice.
To Pastor Johnson, obviously part of what's at stake in this election is overall control of Congress. What would your priorities be if you and other Democrats gain control of the House?
Well, listen, this is more than just the control of Congress. This election is not about right versus left, blue versus red. We're on the same team, red, white, and blue. This election is about whether we will go forward as a country or backwards as a country. And some of my priorities include making sure we shore up Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security for the promises we have made to those working Americans who paid into those programs, making sure we keep our promises to our veterans. I'm ashamed that one of the worst VA hospitals is located in my congressional district, and Mr. Allen has done nothing about it. We will also make sure that we put a check, as American people have asked us to do, on an executive that is out of control. And we put the right folks in cages, not children, but the right criminals who are expanded the swamp in Washington, D.C., and are leeching off of the American people every single day. And so if the folks of my district, all 719,940 of them, want a representative who will go to Congress and fight for them, not for corporate interests, but for them, then they can elect Francis Johnson. I'll be so honored to serve you in Congress.
All right, thanks a lot, Mr. Johnson. Raul Bala, your turn.
Thanks, Brad. This question is for Congressman Allen. Congressman, owners of the Plant Vogel's 2 new nuclear reactors recently reworked their agreement, after concerns were raised that the latest increase in construction cost pushed the bill to $27 billion. Here's my question for you. If necessary, would you advocate for the use of taxpayer dollars? And to be clear, I'm not talking about loan guarantees or nuclear credits. Would you advocate for the use of taxpayer dollars if the project falls into further trouble?
No. Let me tell you, I've been where they are. I've had companies that I've worked with that have gone bankrupt. It is very difficult to deal with. I applaud Southern Company and their partners for continuing the construction. The bottom line, when you look at the kilowatt cost per hour, it's still going to be the most competitive energy available to it, and it's clean energy. As far as the comment from my opponent about the VA, I just got news, by the way, and you'd like to know this, I'm sure. Yes, we were concerned with our VA in Dublin. They had a 1-star rating. I just got news they're now a 3-star. They have jumped 2 stars. We went down, we visited, we investigated, and we're improving. And we've passed over 50 pieces of legislation to help our veterans as far as accountability and choice.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Emily Jones, your turn to ask a question of one of our candidates.
Congressman, this also is for you. To return to economic growth, what do you plan to do to ensure that the type of growth that you've touted and talked about also includes and reaches the more rural parts of the 12th District?
Well, yes. I mean, we have got to, one of the president's programs is infrastructure. We have got to have broadband in our rural areas. This will do more to drive economic growth in rural areas than anything available out there to us. I mean, in areas in my district, I don't even have cell service. We need to pass legislation, and Georgia's working on this as well. If we get broadband and cell service in our rural areas in the district, you will see tremendous economic growth. The president also has a rural initiative We have opportunity zones. Frankly, in my discussions with chambers, I'm on my bus tour right now, and every chamber I meet with, they're seeing tremendous interest in building jobs. We just had an announcement in my opponent's home county of several hundred jobs. So I'm very pleased with how we're doing rurally. And obviously, I'm doing everything I can to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. A quick question for both candidates, if I may.
Can I get a rebuttal on that? He did mention me.
Yeah, let me do this real quick.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead. Go ahead. Let's try 15 seconds on the rebuttal so we can keep it moving.
You know, we can do better. Just drive through the district and you'll see towns that are boarded up and the folks who are not engaged. No real wage growth. All of the benefits inuring to the 1%. Rick Allen, I know that you're working in Congress and there's been some growth, but it's not been for the good people, the good, hardworking people of the 12th Congressional
Mr.
District.
Johnson,
I have
thank
to
you.
rebut that.
Well, let me
He's
say
exactly
this.
right. 4 years ago, that's exactly what I saw.
Let me say this, Mr.
I saw
Allen.
towns that were dying.
Y'all will appreciate this, I assure
And
you.
today, I'm seeing
at the
vibrant
end
growth.
of this, thank you. At the end of this debate,
Maybe
each
of your bank account.
Each candidate will be given 60 seconds to make a closing statement. So I would encourage you, gentlemen, to save all of your rebuttals up, turn them into mini rebuttals, and then cram them into that final 60 seconds. That way we keep the questions coming. There's this one. We've talked about the great state of Georgia. Let's look nationwide. You have 7,000 migrants as we speak making their way to the southern border of the United States. They'll be here in about 4 months as they walk along the way. What should we do with them when they get here? Rick Allen, we'll start with you. Francis Johnson, you after that. 1 minute each. When they get here, what happens?
I have been to Honduras on a mission trip, and I will say conditions there are, well, I can tell you this. I am glad I'm an American. I can certainly understand why these people want to come here. When I was in Honduras, we were there to help those folks. I think that is the proper way to do things. At home, with their families, and we try to help those folks. I think the church can be a big part of this, and the people of this country. We have laws in this country. We have existing immigration laws. And as far as people breaking those laws, we're a nation of laws, and we must obey the law. Now, if the immigration law, which we know is not working, we need to change it. And we did that very thing. We had 193 votes in the United States Congress to try to fix our immigration laws. Not one member of his party voted for that legislation.
Mr. Johnson, your thoughts on when those thousands of migrants arrive in America?
You know, this is a story that is not new. For as long as we have been a country, for those who came of their own volition, they came looking for the same thing those 7,000 are coming for, and they're looking for a better way of life. We have some laws that are antiquated, that are outdated, and need updating. We need comprehensive immigration reform in this country. But you can't get to that comprehensive immigration reform when the president and his party starts to separate children from their parents and put them in cages as a election strategy to gin up the extreme parts of their base. You can't get to comprehensive immigration reform. And the president says, I will sign any piece of legislation. And then when legislation is proposed, bipartisan legislation is proposed, the president balks at it because they need something to run on. They need you to be afraid of these persons who are coming to this country. They need you to be so frightful that you will either go out and cast the ballot for them or just stay at home. Let me tell you something.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
This is the land of the free and
Yes,
home
sir.
of the brave, and we intend to keep it so.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Mr. Johnson. Raul Bali, your turn to ask a question of a candidate.
A question for both gentlemen. Should people living in Georgia, and specifically the 12th District, living here illegally be counted in the upcoming 2020 census?
Who you want to go first, sir?
The candidate of your choice, you want to start with Mr. Allen,
start
since
with
Mr.
Mr.
Johnson
Congressman
responded last?
Illegal immigrants here counted in the census? Absolutely not. No. What we need to do is pass comprehensive immigration reform and allow people who are here. The only thing we did in our immigration bill was, there's a provision in our laws where it says you have to step back for 10 years, okay? And then you can get legal status in the nation. That is exactly what was in it. We waived the 10-year process, okay, to fix this problem that we've got with illegal immigrants here. Now, I can tell you this. The other problem we've got is we have illegal immigrants in this country who are committing crimes. I'm talking, you know, the gamut.
We got a few of them in the president's cabinet, too.
We've got folks in sanctuary cities that are committing violent crimes, and these people want to make sure we continue that policy.
Mr. Allen, thank you so much. Mr. Johnson, illegal immigrants, should they be counted in the census?
Well, according to the president's plan for the census, he intends to instruct census workers to ask citizenship questions of those who they poll. So maybe Mr. Allen should talk with his caucus and talk with their president about what his plans are for the 2020 census. You know, ultimately, the census is mandated by the United States Constitution to provide an accurate count of those persons within the Constitution. It is not to be used as a partisan tool to gain some advantage in an election. You know, for the good immigrants who've come to this country, whether they came in the first wave of those seeking freedom from religious persecution, or those who came in chains, as my ancestors did, or for those who came running from famine of Ireland, or any of the other immigrants who've come to this country, they've contributed to this country. They're taxpayers. They're vital to the vibrancy of this country. And Mr. Allen should either propose legislation to take down the Statue of Liberty with its welcome mat that says, give me your tired, your hungry, your masses yearning to be free, or he should let America be America.
Emily Jones, your turn to ask a question of our candidates. Candidates, let's try to do our answers in 30 seconds or less. That way, with our short time remaining, we'll get a lot in. Emily?
I also have a question for both of you. What is your plan to help address the opioid crisis, particularly, again, in the more rural parts of your district where you know, rural health care is increasingly struggling? And we'll, I guess, start with...
Sure. We start with the premise that health care is a basic human right, because we've got to address this from a health care standpoint and not from a criminal justice standpoint. And I proposed the same ideas when we were dealing with other epidemics with drugs. The fact of the matter is, the reason why we have this opioid crisis is because we've allowed pharmaceutical companies to conspire with doctors and conspire with others to produce a climate where we make pain pills so readily available. We have a dismantled mental health system, healthcare system that can't treat people who are impacted. It's time we get serious about this and put people first.
Mr. Johnson, thanks. Mr. Allen, opioids for you.
Yes, I mean, the legislation is there. The president's going to probably sign it next week to deal with this crisis. It was bipartisan. In fact, 70% of the legislation this president has signed has been almost 68% has been bipartisan. This is one of them, dealing with the crisis. Republicans, Democrats coming together to solve this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Johnson, Raul Bali, last question from our panelists is yours.
Question for Pastor Johnson. Areas in and around Augusta and Savannah, and specifically the 12th District, have had a history of gerrymandering. Is there a place for Congress and even a more significant role for the federal government when it comes to congressional redistricting that's coming up after the 2020 census?
30 seconds. 30 seconds for each.
Absolutely. In addition to being a pastor for more than 20 years, I've also been a lawyer, and I'm so proud of our work in voting rights. And nothing is more sacrosanct in our democracy than the right to vote. John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, said that it is preservative of all other rights. Congress needs to get up and get its job done in passing a fix to the Voting Rights Act. And it's been on Mr. Allen's desk for 4 years. You send me to Congress and we'll get it done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. It is time now for our closing statements. Each candidate is going to have 60 seconds for that. Francis Johnson, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you, Brad, and to the other moderators and to the Atlanta Press Club for having this debate. You know, I decided to run for Congress 15 months ago simply because we weren't getting the job done. Rick Allen stood on this stage and said that you ought to send someone to get the job done. And we thought if we sent a bill to Congress that he would focus on infrastructure, that he would focus on our jobs, he would focus on health care. But instead, he's gone to Washington, D.C. and engaged in partisan fights. You know, the best predictor of future performance is past behavior, and his behavior is simply insufficient for the 719,940 citizens of the 12th Congressional District. I was raised on a farm right there in Sylvania, Scriven County. And my grandfather taught me that you've got to do the work. And sometimes when we were preparing to go to the fields, we would clean up the house first. And then I would say, well, I've done the work. He said, no, the work is in the fields. We must clean up the House of Representatives, and that starts with having a new representative sit in the 116th Congress. And then we've got to get in the field and do the work. Bring jobs, build infrastructure, improve our education, and make sure that we reform government.
Rick Allen, it is your turn.
Yeah, the last thing we need to do in the next Congress is put Nancy Pelosi in charge. I'm telling you, folks, I don't know where this man has been. I said it before. We just became the best economy in the world. We have 7 million jobs opened. I was a big part of that. I went to Congress. I ran for Congress to grow this economy and grow jobs. The greatest privilege I've had in my life was giving folks the dignity and respect they deserve by giving them a good job and allowing them to do what God created to do, empowering them to be the best they can be, and also giving them the opportunity to provide for their families, their church, and yes, their communities in this country. I can't tell you, I did not know I would be at this point in this Congress. I am so excited about where we're going, and I just ask for your vote to continue that progress. Thank you very much.
Rick Allen, Francis Johnson, thanks to both of you gentlemen for your time today. And folks, that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, and early voting has already begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. You all did a great job. And also thanks so much to the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. For more information on the full schedule of general election debates, won't you please visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Brad Means. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.